Thank you again, everyone, for joining my Instagram live series, Immigration Simplified. My name is Kayandi Devonish, and I am a regulated immigration consultant here in Canada. If you don't understand what the term RCIC means, I would have explained it in my first video in detail, but just a little recap. What that means is that I'm licensed by the government of Canada to help persons who want to immigrate, study, visit, or work in Canada. All right, and the reason I say license is because there are a lot of persons out there who are helping persons to migrate or to work, but they're not licensed. So every live that I do, I emphasize that whoever you're working with, just ask them what their license number is, and you do your due diligence and go and research them. There is a public registry on the government of Canada's website where you can go and find out if that license number matches up to the person you're talking to, so you could at least feel at ease that the person you're dealing with is, of course, licensed. Okay, so as I said, my name is Kayandi Devonish, and I'm a licensed consultant with Immigration Canada. So today's episode 2. If you missed episode 1, it is on my live where we just talked about why does Canada allow so many immigrants, how to avoid being like the job scams and immigration fraud. We spoke about what it's actually like living in Canada and the realities of living here, and a few other things that we spoke on that live. So if you missed that live, you can always go back and look at it on my Instagram wall. All right, so every episode that I do, I would be posting it up for view if you want to share it later or you want to watch it later. Okay, some housekeeping rules. Anything I see on this live is general information. It does not constitute as legal advice. I am not able to answer any personalized questions about anyone's personal situation because of confidentiality. And thirdly, if you all have any questions, there's a question button at the bottom of Instagram. I think it should be on yours, that you can always ask the questions there, because I won't be able to go back through the comments. So if you have a question you'd like me to answer at the end of the live, you can put the question in the question box and I would try to answer it at the end of the live. All right, because if you saw the agenda, you will see that I have a questions and answer segment. Okay, so today we're talking about Canadian work permits. Okay, that's a question I get asked a lot. How can I work in Canada? Hi, I got a job, and what is the next process? First thing I used to ask people, do you have a job offer? No, well, I want to go up and see, So hopefully at the end of this live, I would shed some knowledge and some understanding on how work permits work in Canada, so you can at least have an idea to see how easy or hard it is for you to decide. But at least you will be informed. So if anyone comes and offer you anything that's very too good to be true, at least you can now have some knowledge to ask them specific questions before you take a job offer. Okay, so what is a Canadian work permit exactly? So Canadian work permit is a legal document issued by the government of Canada that states that you can legally work in Canada. So this document, sometimes they have the employer you are allowed to work with, the location you're allowed to work with, how long you're able to work here, right? There are some work permits that they don't list anything, and I'll get more into that later on. But it's basically a piece of paper that says you are eligible to legally work in Canada. So when people tell me, hey, I'm coming to Canada on my work permit, I'm like, no. So when you have a work permit, you now have to go and apply to get entry into Canada, because a work permit is just a document authorizing work. You now have to either apply for a visitor visa, or if it is you're from certain countries, you could apply for an ET, which is an electronic travel authorization document. So once you are approved and you get your work permit, you now have to go and apply to get your visa to now go board a plane and reach to Canada. Okay? So next on the agenda, we're talking about what are the different types of work permits. So in essence, there are basically 2 types of work permits. The first work permit is considered a closed or an employer-specific work permit. And the second type of work permit is an open work permit. So a closed or employer-specific work permit basically is closed to a specific employer. So that employer is hiring you, a foreign national, to come and work for their company. So if you have a closed or an employer-specific work permit, on that document, you would have a specific employer. You would have a specific duration based on your contract or your job offer. You would have sometimes given a specific location, because some companies, they might be at different locations in Canada. So that job offer that work permit would say what location you're supposed to work at. And of course, for that specific work permit, you need a job offer. You need an employer to now hire you. The second type of work permit is an open work permit. And as the title suggests, that means it's open. You can work for anyone. You can work for how many hours you want. You can work anywhere in Canada. However, that person, oh, that sounds good. But there are only few persons in the world that are eligible for an open work permit. Okay? So we'll start with open work permits first before we get into the closed and employer work permit. Right? So to be eligible for an open work permit, this list I'm saying is exhaustive. You can find this on the Government of Canada website, but I'll just go through the top 5 most common eligibility requirements. So the first one is if you're an international student who has met the requirements to now apply for this work permit. So in order to get a work permit as a student in Canada, you must have graduated from a designated learning institution, and your program must have been at least 8 months. So if it is you would have studied for 6 months or 7 months, you're not eligible for a work permit. But once you graduated from that type of university, 8 months or more, it could have been 4 years or 5 years, but once it's 8 months and more, and you will have graduated and not flunked out, and also abided by some other rules that once you're eligible, there's a list of different other criteria. Once you meet all the criteria as a student, you are eligible for an open work permit. You're now able to work for any employer, and this also goes for your spouse. So if you're married, if you're common law, if you're conjugal, means you're not married and you're not living together, but for some reason, probably religious reasons, you can't live in the same house or cohabitate. That person who, of course, these things you have to show proof. It's not just, I am a conjugal. It has to be, of course, something you have proof. But once you have that, you'll have your spouse who you're legally married to, your common law conjugal. They are also able to get an open work permit with you once you're an international student. So that's one. So the second eligibility for an open work permit is someone who applied for spousal permanent residence. So that means either like your husband or wife. So say, take me. I'm a permanent resident and I got married and applying for my husband who is in Grenada to get permanent residence. Instead of him waiting in Grenada for the permanent resident application to be submitted and to be approved, he can now leave Grenada without even getting his residence and come to Canada and work while his application is being processed. Right? That goes for both if it's your wife or your husband, and that goes for our dependent children under the age, well, not under the age of 18, but because you can't really work under the age. But say they're like 21 and they're going to school or they're like in university, they're able to get an open work permit. Right? The third option is if it is you are a spouse of someone who works in a low or high wage profession in Canada already. So your husband may have gotten an employer-specific work permit. You are not left in your home country waiting for them to come back. You are now, so you're going on the spouse's credits and their merits. And once they get through that job offer, you are now allowed to travel with your spouse to Canada, and you're able to work for any employer. But he or she, the spouse, they will have to work for whichever employer they came here on. Right? But the other spouse who was not named on the work permit, they are able to work for anyone. The fourth option for an open work permit is someone who's a refugee or someone fleeing persecution or just in need of protection. Right? That's a whole other life that I will get into. But these people, like if you're coming from say Ukraine and life is so bad that you come to Canada, you're now able to, you don't have to now look for an employer to just get a work permit. Once it is you have a perceived or real threat to your life, Canada welcomes these kinds of people and you're able to get a work permit. And the fifth one I'll talk about is if, for example, you did come here on a closed work permit, but your employer is abusing you or not paying you, or even you're at a risk of getting abused or being taken advantage of, which happens, unfortunately. Employers say, oh, you're from a small island, I shouldn't treat you like this. If it is, you have your proof, and you can now, like, whatever proof you have that you're not treated fairly in the workplace. Once it is, there's an investigation done, and it is found that you are at risk of being abused, you are now able to work for an open work. You're now able to get an open work permit, right? So basically, moving from a closed one, and because of abuse, you're now allowed to work for any employer that you can now find, because you're already in Canada, and it's not your fault that you have been abused. As I said, this list is not exhaustive, but you can go onto the Government Canada site. You can type in who qualifies for an open work permit, and there's a list of different eligibility requirements. Okay, so getting into the third topic on the agenda, what jobs in Canada are exempt from work permits? So yes, so some jobs are exempt from work permits, but these jobs are exempt only because they are short term and you don't actually have to enter the Canada workforce. So what do I mean by that? So for example, you're an engineer, you're a chemical engineer. BP wants to hire you in Canada. That would not be considered an exemption in that case, because you're now going to work for a Canadian company. However, if you are an engineer for BP in Trinidad and they want you to come and fix or come to training in BP Canada from Trinidad for 2-3 months, and you're training there, you're still getting paid from BP Trinidad, but you're up in Canada doing working with the staff in Canada, doing projects, doing whatever. You are able to work in Canada without needing a work permit at that time. So there are lists of different occupations that are allowed to work in Canada for short periods without requiring a work permit. These include people like sportsmen, athletes, footballers, like if they're representing their home country and coming to play like for Olympics or a football match or hockey match, swimming, but they're representing their country, they are now able to work in Canada without requiring a work permit. If this footballer now wants to leave his home country's team and play for a team in Canada, that's where he would now have to apply for a work permit, because now he has a team willing to hire him. And I find just by doing interacting with persons, sports is something big in Canada, and if you're a sports person, I'm telling you, it's a little easier to get into Canada to work, especially footballers and these things. So it's not easy, it's not difficult to transfer your requiring no work permit to actually get a work permit into sports. Another occupation are actors, television crew, news reporters. So you might see Samson Anton or some television reporter from Trinidad going to Canada to cover a strike or cover some world news that they are probably broadcasting on the Caribbean's network or Caribbean news stations. So when that reporter from the Caribbean leaves the Caribbean, comes to Canada to now do their job, act in a movie, act in an ad campaign, advertisements, these things, they don't need a work permit. As I said, once it is for a short period and they're not becoming an employee of the Canadian company. So that is the distinction. Once it is they're remaining the employee of the Caribbean or their home country's company and not trying to get a job from that Canadian company, they are able to work without work permits. You have persons like, if you're coming to give a speech or a seminar, find insurance advisors are coming to talk about, okay, I want investments, these kinds of persons, public speakers. You have pastors, ministers, coaches, referees, airline crews. These are people who work in the Caribbean Airlines. They're going from Port of Spain to Toronto to Calgary. They are able to continue their jobs without requiring a work permit in Canada, right? So those are the types of jobs and short-term jobs that you're allowed to work without needing a work permit in Canada. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in. So guys, I would get to this, and because we're good on time, because I think I just have like two more. Yeah, just one more topic, and then we can get to the questions, right? Remember, I'm trying to finish at 8:30 to keep it short and sweet, right? For those now joining, I would be reposting the recording onto my Instagram. So I'm seeing questions coming into the chat. They can put, I saw that question. So can I come and do research on short term? Yes. If it is like you have a PhD and these things, they allow you to, once you have a university or a research group allowing you to come to Canada. Of course, it's not just you wake up one morning, hey, I want to do research in Canada. No, there must be some company who's doing research, and they said, you have knowledge in this, you have specialized knowledge in this, you have written papers, you have a PhD in it, or whatever. Like there's a list of requirements, and if they're saying, okay, yes, we want you to come for 2 months and work with us on this project because this will be something beneficial to Canada. All right, so I'll talk about that later as well. So anyway, so as I said, guys, put your questions in question. And last thing, so we spoke about the open work permits and who qualifies for that, and we spoke about the persons who do not need a work permit at all. These are short-term persons who are not entering the workforce. All right, and of course this means it is not a good route to get residence because you're not working in Canada. So the last topic would be closed or employer specific work permits, and that's where the majority of foreign nationals, that's the type of work permit that they would get once they're entering into Canada, right? Closed or employer specific work permits, meaning a specific employer needs you, whatever your skill set. It could be a welder, it could be a plumber, it could be a doctor, it could be a teacher, whatever the occupation is, but that employer needs you. And now they are applying for you to come into Canada, and you now have to work with this employer. You can't come up here and change your mind. Oh, well, I don't want to work for this university again. I want to work for... No, it doesn't work like that. Okay, so let's get into the process and what goes on for a foreign national to reach to Canada on an employer or closed work permit. So first thing that an employer needs to have is a LMIA. LMIE. So that means a labor market impact assessment. So this is basically a letter or a document from the government of Canada through the job. I can't remember the exact term. It's like the part of the government, a ministry in the government that's like looks to see what the jobs of what are the demand jobs, what is the employment status is like. So they will now assess, okay, you want to bring in a doctor who does neurology. Let us look to see who in Canada can do that. Let us see, are they available now to come and work at your company? So that is what that LMI states, that there's no Canadian or no Canadian resident already in Canada available to come to occupy that occupation or that job post that this employer is now seeking to fill. So once that employer gets a positive LMIA, meaning the government says, yes, you are right, there is a need for foreign national to come because nobody in Canada is willing or able or available to now fill this position, this employer is now able to bring in foreign nationals. So they can now put out their recruitment ads in Trinidad, in Jamaica, in Barbados, in Grenada, in India, wherever. You can now bring in that foreign national very easily once you have that LMIA document. That is literally something that's cool in Canada. When someone says, yes, I have an LMIA, like as a consultant, I just feel happy because it's easy sailing from there. Because if you don't have that, you can't get it because it's a long process. You have to show that you advertise in all the Canadian job boards, in the government websites. If it is an engineer, in all the engineering associations, you have to show that you earnestly tried to hire somebody in Canada and there's no one available for that job position, and you need to hire for a national. In another live, probably later on in this month or in August, I would talk about the jobs that are in demand that a lot of Canadians are not taking up. So at least if you fall in that occupation, you will be seeing a lot of LMIA approved job offers like on Canadian websites. Because employers put up that, they put up LMIA approved. So once you see that, you know, hey, this employer went through the process to get this LMIA already. So now it's just for you to apply, put your best Canadian resume together, do the interview, and once you get through, you're in Canada. All right? So for the LMIA, only an employer can apply for this. Okay? You as an applicant or job seeker cannot apply to the government because it's the employer to show that they tried to source an employee in Canada. So it's only an employer or the company can apply for that LMIA. There are, as with everything, there are exemptions for requiring an LMIA for some types of employers. Okay? So the three main exemptions are: one, intra-company transfers. So these are companies, you might have, say, Republic Bank in Trinidad, Republic Bank in Barbados, Republic Bank in Jamaica, but Republic Bank actually started, which is Royal Bank of Canada, is a Canadian company. So you might be at the executive or managerial level in one of these banks, and you want to now come to Canada, but with RBC, of course, you can't come with anyone. So RBC can now say, okay, this manager, they have extensive knowledge of our company policies, how our banking system works, our IT, our infrastructure, and we would like to bring that person to come to Canada through RBC. You will not need to get an LMI for that because this person is already in the company. You can't hire a Canadian who is not in the RBC culture and know what's going on and say, no, well, you could hire this manager. So they allow that person to already work in certain companies, multinational companies, to come to Canada without needing to do that whole LMIA, labor market impact assessment process. So it's intra-company transfers. The second thing are workers or foreign nationals from countries that have free trade agreements with Canada. So I'm not sure if many of you may know things like when you hear about NAFTA, CUSMA, these are agreements that Canada has with other countries. So they have countries trade agreements with like the USA, Chile, Peru, Europe, Mexico. So qualified and skilled workers from these countries can now move to Canada and work much easily because they don't require an LMIA, and it is a reciprocal agreement, meaning Canadians could go to the US, Canadians could go to Chile, Canadians can go to Peru, to Mexico and work with that reciprocal trade agreement. You know, and as I stress on making sure it's like a highly skilled or like a trade job, so it's not like any and all types of occupations are eligible, but I said, like, we can't get into all of that tonight. And the last thing is, if you can get an LMIA exemption, is if you bring significant cultural, social, economical benefit to Canada. So if it is you're a highly sought after author or highly sought after trade, like investor, or even a singer or a minister of finance who would have done great work in that country, now wants to come to Canada and now build Canada, or you are great for a sports person or coach or something that could help Canada and create jobs, they would say, okay, since you have this specialized knowledge on a national level or global level, you have easy access to come to Canada and benefit Canada. Okay, so those are the three areas that you can get an LMIA exemption. Right, so once you have that LMIA, the positive LMIA, and the employer is willing to hire you as a foreign national, all you need to do are 4 simple steps. You get a copy of that LMIA that is given from the government to the employer. You get the LMIA number, which will be stated on that document. You get the official job offer that the employer is going to be giving you. You get a signed contract that both you and the hiring manager or whoever is the person from the company who's authorized, a signed contract with both signatures, and you make your way to apply for your work permit. And that's very simple. So as I said, once you get that work permit, it's literally probably within a month you can come to Canada and apply for your ETA and get through. All right, just finishing up quickly before I answer questions. I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer, but even if it is you get to that LMIA and all the documents, you can still be denied a work permit. And the situations where this happens is if they think the applicant who's being hired does not meet the criteria for that job. So you apply, you get through with a job for a doctor, to be a doctor, but you've been working as a nurse for your whole life. They'll be like, no, you're not. You can't perform these duties. You know, you're an insurance agent, but you got a job offer to be a chef at a 4-star. Like, if they think it doesn't make sense, or it's like some sort of, I wouldn't say scam, but it just doesn't make logical sense, and based on your education and your work experience, they would still deny you even though you have an LMIA. Another way you can get denied is if the employer is ineligible to hire foreign nationals. So if that employer has been charged with abusing employees in the past, or not paying proper wages, or not following through with the requirements for an employer that Canada sets a standard for these employees and how to treat employees. If they think that you have been breaching these rules, they will not allow you to hire a foreign national. You will be basically in punishment. So if you bring a job offer from that employer and you go to Canada, they would deny your application. The third thing is if it says you don't meet certain immigration requirements, like you have a criminal record, you have a medical inadmissibility that might be a drain on the medical system, or one of your family members are ineligible, or you probably overstayed on your visit on your last passport. You know, all of these things the officer would deny you on. And the last thing is if you intend to work in jobs like the erotic services, or something that's in like illegal jobs, or like, you know, something that is not on the list of occupations that are allowed to work for work permits, allowed to apply for work permits. All right, so those are the top 4. I said there are many others which you can find on the Government of Canada website. You just Google how can I be denied, you would see. Once you don't fall into that category, it should be smooth sailing. Okay, so I'm running a little behind time. I'll try to answer these questions quickly. Yes, I'll be saving the live and posting it up. Okay, so I'm seeing people having they said they have so many questions. Yes, you could always DM me at the end of the live, and I would be happy to talk to you privately about personal situations. What are the best sites to look for a job in Canada? So for me personally, I would start off by saying before you even look for a job, you need to understand the Canadian resume system, in terms of, in the Caribbean, we are so used to sending one resume to 100 employers. I'm telling you, it won't work in Canada, because they use something called ATS, and I would do another live. Don't worry, guys, I would be informing you all. I would do another live later on talking about the automatic applicant tracking system, where they rank you. As you press send your resume, you're already ranked, and if you don't meet that rank, you are eliminated within 2 seconds. And what goes into that ranking are keywords. So if they have a job offer for a doctor and they say, okay, operated on a brain, you cannot put operated on a hand. If they want a chef cooking Indian delicacies, you cannot put I cook all delicacies. No, you need to put Indian delicacies. You need to put all these keywords into your resume, because it's AI. Like, being real, Canadian employers are not sitting down going through each resume. They will do that once they come down to their final 20, 30 after the AI sorted it. So if you don't have those keywords, you're not going to make it past round 1. So before you even start to apply, you need to have a general resume that you have, and now for each application that you're doing, you have to now tailor it and make sure that the keywords, if they ask for Microsoft Word, don't say I have Microsoft Office. You're going to fail. It's that sensitive, right? And as me being a resident myself, I went through all that. I learned it. No one told me. I didn't have these lives. I didn't have anyone to talk to. But now that I learned it, I want to share it with you all, right? So in terms of the best sites to look for in Job Canada after, you make sure your resume is good, I would say Indeed.ca. I also think LinkedIn is good, where you might see the job at Indeed, and then you reach out to the hiring manager on on LinkedIn directly. Don't be too much, but just reach out to them and explain your situation. Some hiring managers actually like to be able to look at your profile and talk to you on that one-on-one, and if they feel comfortable, they might say, hey, they might be able to extend if it is they can. LinkedIn is good. Workopolis, there's Glassdoor. I would have to get some more as well. I could always post it up on under the chat when I post the video, okay? Wow, these questions are long. Okay, guys, so the questions are really good, and it seems that they're personal questions, and with these lives I like to give general information. So in terms of like the websites, you know, that's beneficial to everyone, but a lot of persons are asking about specific occupations, and I can talk to you all. Like, just message me. As I said, I'm free. Like, once it is I can help, I would help. And once it is you want to now apply, that's where we would, you know, get into business. But if you just want some general information about your specific case, just send me a message on Instagram, and I would try to direct you to the proper sources. But I don't want to get in and start to talk about personal situations, right? So it's 8:35, guys. Okay, this question is, can you apply for the ETA doc if you already applied for the PR? Yes. So that is something in Canada called dual intention. And you are able to apply, even though you apply for permanent residence, you are also able to apply for temporary residence while you're waiting on your case, right? It is, I wouldn't use the word illegal, but they tell visa officers that you should not, like, deny someone a temporary visa because you already applied for permanent visa and are waiting, you know, because they might think if you apply for permanent visa, you're trying to come into the country to stay. They can't assume that, okay? Last question I'll answer that I saw. If you're eliminated, can you try again? I'm not sure what that means. I'm on vacation and want to work. How can I be eligible for work permit? That's a very good question. And with the introduction to the ETAs, you know, I've realized a lot of Trinidadians, Jamaicans, Bajans, they want to just come up and do an exploratory visit just to see how Canada's like. And that is actually something that I would push, because in my first live, I said that Canada is not something that is the best for everyone. Like, you might say, hey, what is it called? Like, come up and see it. Come up and experience it for yourself. Come up a winter. You know, once you come up here, you can also now go in person to these employers. So you won't come up here and not have to look. You'll be in Trinidad, looking on Indeed, looking on Workopolis, looking on Glassdoor, seeing what employers you want to target. And when you reach up here with your 6 months, you can now go to these employers in person and just talk to them, you know, in person, and meeting people, especially now after COVID. Most people welcome it. It's because they've been behind a screen so much, you know. Like, even in my Rotary Club, like, the theme was connect, because we were so connected to Wi-Fi, connected to Zoom, but now that we're back out, they're trying to connect to each other. So I would say that coming to Canada, we're trying to go into these offices, talk to the hiring manager, just get advice, just get, you know, just talk to them, get your name out, see what the culture is like. So you can't do that. To say that you can just apply for work permits, no. As I said, you need to either be on one of those lists where you're exempted or you don't need an LMIA. And to be very fair, right now, there are not much Caribbean people who would fall into these exemptions. I'm not saying they aren't. They are very highly skilled foreign nationals in the Caribbean. But most persons that, like, who are my clients, they go through the LMIA approach. Whether you're engineers, you know, because I was an engineer, so a lot of my persons, so I talk to engineers. But yeah. So anyway, guys, it's 8:37. I'm 7 minutes over. I will be uploading the live onto my Instagram now.